Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. Today we've got 3 brand new casual decks for you and a returning Godzilla deck. Let's jump right in and see who's playing what, but before that, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video. Up first is Cody and his Ghave deck. On the surface, this deck might just look like your average Abzan counters deck. And while Cody can play that game plan if he really wants to, it's actually a really resilient combo deck. If you pair Ghave with Phyrexian or Ashnod's Altar and an Undying creature, you'll end up with infinite 1/1 Saproling creatures. But if that Undying creature has an ETB trigger, like Giraffe's Messenger, you'll end up killing everyone right then and there. Up next is Cameron playing Chandler's Godzilla deck. If you've seen our Godzilla vs. Kong video, this will be pretty familiar to you. So I'll keep it pretty simple for you guys. Godzilla's a big monster, so there's a lot of big monsters in this deck. And because there's a lot of big monsters in the deck, the main goal of it is to hit people hard. But there's also a whole lot of ramp in this deck to make sure you get the monsters out quick. Alright, up next is Justin and his Alesha deck. And this deck is a good old-fashioned humans tribal deck. Now I do say that, and it can certainly run the beatdown plan, but it also has the Felidar Guardian, Restoration Angel, and Impact Tremors combo in it. And not to mention that Mardu just has a lot of interaction in it. And last but not least is Ethan's Kambal Chicken Noodle Soup deck. The main goal of this deck is to slow other players down while Ethan gains life. And every time he plays it, it seems to enrage Cody. The main combo in this deck is the Heliod Ballista combo, and if he can get it started, everyone will die immediately. And running black and white gives him plenty of ways to interact with other players' creatures. Alright you guys, now that we've seen what everyone's playing, let's jump straight into the hands. Up first is Cody, who keeps his starting hand of 2 Snow-Covered Plains, Overgrown Tomb, Thriving Heath, Soul Ring, Talisman of Hierarchy, and an Abrupt Decay. This hand has a great potential to it. It's very fast, and if he can draw right, he can win the game easily. Up next is Cameron, who's rocking 2 Forests, a Mountain, Rampant Growth, Rhythm of the Wild, Garruk's Uprising, and Nissa Vital Force. Also a great hand, decent amount of lands, turn 2 ramp, and Garruk's Uprising and Nissa will potentially draw him into a lot of good cards. Up next is Justin, who keeps Needle Verge Pathway, Plains, Mountain, Mother of Runes, Priest of Forgotten Gods, Verge Rangers, and Imperial Recruiter. Also not a bad hand. It's missing black, but a turn 1 Mom is always good. And finally we've got Ethan with an explosive hand. He's got Bloodstained Mire, Prismatic Vista, Baron Moor, Chrome Mox, Mana Vault, Condemn, and Deafening Silence. As I just said, this hand is very explosive, and the early mana can go a long way. Alright you guys, now that we've seen the hands, let's jump straight into the game. Cody wins the die roll, and he starts his turn off by shocking in an Overgrown Tomb, and then casting Finhorn Elves, and passes to Cameron. Cameron plays Mosswort Bridge, exiling one of the top 4 cards of his library, and then passes to Ethan. Ethan fetches and shocks for a Godless Shrine, then casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Condemn, uses that to cast Mana Vault, and then taps his Godless Shrine to cast Deafening Silence before passing to Justin. Justin plays a Plains and casts Mother of Runes, then passes to Cody. Cody, now unable to dump his hand thanks to the Deafening Silence, just plays a Snow-Covered Plains and casts Soul Ring before passing to Cameron. Cameron plays a Mountain, and then casts Rampant Growth, finding a forest to the battlefield tapped. Cameron then passes to Ethan, who immediately plays a Plains and casts Kambal. Afterwards, he passes to Justin. And on his turn, Justin plays Needle Verge Pathway before passing to Cody. Cody plays Thriving Heath, naming green, then taps for 2 to cast Return to Nature, targeting Ethan's Deafening Silence. He then taps for 2 with Soul Ring, casting Talisman of Hierarchy, then taps his Talisman and Finhorn Elves to Abrupt Decay Kambal. Cody loses a total of 7 life throughout all of this, and Ethan gains 6. Cody then passes to Cameron. Cameron plays a tapped Forgotten Cave, then taps for 3 and casts a Rhythm of the Wild. Cameron passes to Ethan after that. Ethan starts his turn off with a Prismatic Vista, then taps for 1 to cast Authority of the Consoles. He then cracks his Vista for a Swamp and recasts Kambal. Ethan then passes to Justin, who plays a Mountain as his land for turn, taps for 3, and casts Verge Rangers before passing to Cody. Cody plays another Snow-Covered Plains as land for turn, then taps out for a Mistcutter Hydra. And unfortunately, with nothing left to do, he passes to Cameron. Cameron plays a Forest as his land for turn, then taps out to cast Nissa Vital Force. He then uses her uptick to make a 5/5 land and swings 5 at Ethan. and then passes to Ethan. Ethan plays a Baron Moor as his land for turn, then taps for 2 to cast Karlov of the Ghost Council. Ethan then passes to Justin. And on his turn, Justin taps for 3 to cast Imperial Recruiter. And it is now at this moment that everybody realizes that Karlov and Authority of the Consuls have a little mini combo. If someone plays a creature, it's tapped, Ethan gains a life, and Karlov gets counters. When Karlov gets 6 counters, Ethan can exile any creature he wants. And so Justin searches up for a Harsh Mentor to his hand, then passes to Cody. Cody, not wanting to feed the Karlov, just swings 7 at Ethan, who takes it. After that, he passes to Cameron. By some miracle, everyone at the table seemed to have forgotten that Nissa ultimates at 6, so Cameron immediately ultimates her. And so Cameron now plays a forest and draws a card. He then plays a Birds of Paradise, giving it a 1/1 counter. Cameron then passes to Ethan. Ethan casts a Soul Ring, and then uses that to cast a Thought Vessel. He then moves to combat and swings Karlov at Cameron, before passing to Justin. Justin plays a Plains off of the top of his library, but unfortunately has to pass to Cody and discards Zulaport Cutthroat. And on Cody's turn, Ethan makes a deal with him. If Cody can make Ethan gain life, he'll use Karlov's abilities on Cameron's Birds of Paradise. And so Cody casts Ghave, and Ethan gets more counters on Karlov. So Cody passes, and on his end step, Ethan removes 6 counters and exiles the bird. And on his turn, Cameron taps for 4 and casts Solemn Simulacrum. Ethan gets Karlov triggers, and Cameron puts a counter on the Sad Sam, and then searches for a mountain to the battlefield tapped. When that mountain enters, he gets to draw a card. After that, he plays a mountain, drawing another card. Cameron then taps for 2 and casts Collector Roof. Ethan gets more triggers, and Cameron puts a 1/1 counter on it. In response, Cody removes a counter from Ghave and makes a 1/1 Sapperling. And unfortunately, the Sapperling ignores the Authority of the Consuls. Cameron passes to Ethan after that. Ethan starts his turn off by casting Blind Obedience. Ethan then swings Karlov at Cameron again and then passes to Justin. Justin plays an Alpine Meadow off the top of his library, then passes to Cody. With Ethan and Cody not being a big fan of the Collector Roof, they make a similar deal to their last one. And so Cody casts Court of Calling, X is equal to 3. He loses 2 and Ethan gains 2. With the spell still on the stack, Ethan goes ahead and removes the 6 counters to exile Collector Roof. Cody then finds a Knight of Autumn to the battlefield tapped, and destroys Ethan's Authority of the Consuls. Cody then, like the absolute Chad he is, path to exiles the Karlov. He then moves to combat, and swings 7 at Ethan. And after all this, he passes to Cameron. Cameron goes straight to his main phase and casts Godzilla, who still enters in tapped, but Ethan is no longer gaining life off of it. He also puts a 1/1 counter on Godzilla thanks to the Riot trigger. And then after this, he taps for 3 and casts Garrick's Uprising, drawing a card to its ETB trigger. He then plays a Misty Rainforest, drawing a card, then passes to Ethan. Ethan decides to untap his Mana Vault on his upkeep. He then casts Vizkopa Guildmage and decides to extort it. Everyone loses a life and Ethan gains 3. After that, Ethan passes to Justin. And on his turn, Justin finally gets some black mana with the Snowfield Sinkhole from the top of his library. He then casts Harsh Mentor, and in response, Cody taps for 2, makes a Sapperling, and sacrifices it to put another counter on his Hydra. And Cameron cracks his Misty Rainforest for a tap Stomping Ground to draw a card. Justin then casts Sanctuary Lockdown, and then passes to Cody. Cody taps for 3 on his turn and casts Evolution Sage. He then moves to combat and swings 11 at Ethan. Ethan takes all 11 points of damage, and then Cody passes to Cameron. And with more than 10 power on his board, Cameron immediately casts his hideaway card, which is Morag. And because Morag untaps with his extra combats, he gives him haste. Everyone at the board is a little worried now. Cameron also draws a card to Garrick's Uprising. Cameron then hard casts a Beanstalk Giant, drawing a card and giving it haste. Cameron then moves to combat, sending Godzilla and the Sad Robot at Justin. Justin takes a total of 13 damage. Cameron then plays Wooded Foothills, getting the landfall trigger, and then moves to his second combat phase. All of his creatures on tap. Cameron then swings Godzilla at Ethan, the Simulacrum at Justin, and Morag at Cody. Cody decides to block with a Sapperling because 1 life could mean the difference, and everyone else takes the full damage. Cameron then moves to instep and discards Godzilla before passing to Ethan. And on his turn, Ethan casts and extorts Charcoal Diamond before passing to Justin. And with it being a really good time for a board wipe, Justin drops Cleansing Nova, destroying all creatures. Cameron responds by cracking his Wooded Foothills for a forest, and he takes an extra 2 to the Harsh Mentor. And with his last 2 mana, he casts Heroic Intervention. With no responses, all creatures are destroyed except for Cameron's, and everyone considers conceding, but Cody said he could possibly top deck his own board wipe. And unfortunately, Cody only draws a deafening silence. He then recasts Ghave, hoping him as a blocker will be able to keep him alive. And after that, he passes to Cameron. And Cameron, wanting to have a little bit of fun, drops an Apex Devastator. And he says he's going to give it haste when it enters the battlefield. On his first Cascade trigger, he hits a Nature's Lore and declines it. On his second one, he hits Nyx Bloom Ancient, casts it, and gives it haste. For his third one, he hits Swiftfoot Boots, also declining it. And he hits Migration Path off of his fourth one. And having a potential non-creature spell in hand that he said he wanted to cast, he also declines this one. And to begin combat, Cameron sends his 12-11 Beanstalk Giant and his 7-6 Morarg at Justin, killing him. He then sends Godzilla and Solemn Simulacrum at Ethan. He then plays War Room as his land for turn, drawing a card off of it, and then moves to his second combat phase, untapping all of his creatures. He sends Godzilla at Ethan, which is more than enough with commander damage to kill him, and the rest at Cody. And because of Garrick's Uprising, they all have trample, and with just one 5/5 blocker, there's no way he's surviving this, so he concedes. Alright you guys, we made it to the end of the video. What'd you think? Did you enjoy it? If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and also give us some feedback in the comments down below. We love hearing from you. Also, consider giving us a follow on our social media pages on Twitter and Instagram. You can get sneak peeks and behind the scenes there. Also, please consider donating to us on our Ko-fi page. We're looking to get a new camera soon, so anything helps. And before we finish off today's video, I'm going to leave you guys with a question. If you could build a commander deck with any of the new Strixhaven commanders, what would it be? Let us know in the comments below. But thanks again for watching, and have a smooth day.